On this Monday night, forging ahead. Days after dodging an assassination attempt, Donald Trump officially becomes the Republicans' presidential nominee and announces his pick for VP. The impact on his campaign, plus new information on the investigation into the shooting. And we hear from witnesses. The torrent of online threats against Canadian politicians.
You're out in public and you're kind of always looking over your shoulders.
We get access to government documents, what they reveal about the threat. Chaos at the Copa America final. Can North America cope with what's coming in the 2026 World Cup? Plus, going for green, the goal to make the Paris Olympics as sustainable as possible.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. His supporters say he took a bullet for his country. And 2 days after an assassination attempt, former President Donald Trump has cemented his place at the head of the Republican Party. To no one's surprise, he was formally nominated today as the party's choice for presidential candidate in November, and he announced his running mate. It is J.D. Vance. He is a former venture capitalist and author of the bestseller Hillbilly Elegy. He then got elected senator in Ohio. Vance used to be a fierce critic of Donald Trump, but he has undergone a transformation. Jackson Proskow is at the Republican convention in Milwaukee. Jackson, what's the reaction to this choice, and what does J.D. Vance bring to the Republican ticket?
Well, Donna, the last few days have brought into focus just how important the role of a vice president could potentially be. J.D. Vance, as a choice, is a staunch defender of Donald Trump, an attack dog, but also sort of proof of this idea that Trump's fiercest critics often end up in his corners as his strongest backers. He is not someone, though, who is likely to expand the party's reach or base at a time when the party claims to be seeking out unity.
Despite everything, Republicans are pressing ahead with the political coronation of Donald Trump.
I think it becomes dramatically more emotional. He comes here as a heroic figure of much larger size than a normal candidate.
Take a look at what happened.
The assassination attempt that came within an inch of his life has only hardened the party and its resolve to win. Top Republicans, like former Speaker Newt Gingrich, believe this is potentially a turning point for a divisive candidate.
Do you believe he may be a changed man after Saturday?
To some extent, you can't possibly be shot and not be changed.
In an interview with the New York Post, Trump said, "I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be dead." He described the Secret Service tackling him like linebackers. Commenting on the remarkable pictures of the aftermath, he said, "Usually you have to die to have an iconic picture."
I think what happened on Saturday, Americans, no matter what their political association is, I think we all are like, there's no room for that. That is not necessary.
After the shooting, Trump came to Milwaukee ahead of schedule, promising to rewrite his Thursday acceptance speech to focus on unifying the country.
Do you expect a tone shift from President Trump?
I do, but I will tell you, it's not even so much a tone shift. His focus has been the American people the entire time. In spite of what happened, it's only doubled his resolve.
For a party fully behind one man, there is a schism over whether it's possible or even wise to try and lower the political temperature.
They tried to assassinate his business, they tried to assassinate his character. None of those work, and so now they tried to assassinate the man himself.
Each coming day will be a test of whether Trump's vision of unity extends beyond the walls of his convention.
Indeed, Trump may already be undoing his own message of unity. In social media posts today, Donna, he suggested the only way to bring the country together is to drop all the various criminal proceedings and to undo the prior court cases, the judgments against him that have already been delivered.
And Jackson, he did have a legal victory today. A federal judge dismissed the case against Trump that he illegally held classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago resort. How big a deal is that, and why did the judge dismiss it?
It's significant because it means the case is unlikely to go to trial, if ever, or at least not before the election. The judge essentially said that special counsel Jack Smith was illegitimate, had been appointed improperly. She, however, did not rule on the validity of the charges themselves. And so that leaves the door open for the Justice Department potentially to appeal this, to also potentially seek the recusal of Justice Cannon. She was appointed by Trump and has had several decisions over the course of this trial that many legal experts have called into question.
Okay, Jackson in Milwaukee, thank you. President Joe Biden says it's time for everyone to cool down the rhetoric. In an interview with NBC News, he was asked about something he told Democratic donors in a phone call last week, that it's time to put Trump in the bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that won't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win.
The FBI says it has now unlocked the cell phone belonging to that 20-year-old man who took aim and fired at Donald Trump during a rally on Saturday. It's not clear yet if they've discovered anything relevant on it. The motive for the shooting is still a mystery, as is how the gunman was able to climb onto a roof with a rifle in direct line of sight of where the former president was speaking. Jeff Semple is following the investigation in Butler, Pennsylvania. Jeff.
Donna, the U.S. president has now ordered an independent investigation to determine how a local 20-year-old managed to get a clear shot at Donald Trump.
The small, sleepy town of Butler, Pennsylvania, tried to get back to normal life 2 days after it found itself at the center of a presidential assassination plot.
Take a look at what happened.
When bullets interrupted Donald Trump's campaign event, this Trump supporter was seated with her niece in the front row.
It was just the screaming and just hearing the fear in people and the children screaming and people running.
She arrived several hours before the event and was invited to stand behind Trump, but declined, a decision that may have saved her life.
In 60 years, I've ever been that afraid or just in disbelief.
I am amazed that a 20-year-old could get this together and do what he did.
Police believe the gunman, 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, was acting alone, and he came very close.
The gunman climbed up onto the roof of that short tin building here behind me, which is located less than 150 meters from where the former U.S. president was speaking.
This unverified video appears to show the shooter on the roof moments before he pulled the trigger.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him?
But security apparently did not see him.
I would have expected that local law enforcement, at the direction of the Secret Service, would have been positioned on those rooftops.
One local police officer reportedly confronted the gunman on the roof, but backed off when he pointed his rifle.
This individual was able to make an attack on the former president with limited capability, knowledge, and training, and that concerns me.
Overnight, police opened the street in front of the would-be assassin's house. Thomas Crooks lived here with his parents, about an hour's drive from the shooting scene. Friends and neighbors say he was a smart student and worked at a nursing home.
He was just a real quiet kid. He stuck to himself.
It appears Crooks had a passion for guns. He was a member at this firearms club, and on the day of the shooting, he wore a T-shirt sold by a popular YouTube channel focused on firearms. Officials say determining his mindset will take time.
The ability to identify a motive is something that, in this situation, is a result of extensive and intensive investigation.
The U.S. Homeland Security Secretary conceded that a clear line of sight like that should not have occurred, adding that changes have now been made to Trump's security detail to ensure his continued protection. Donna?
Jeff, thanks. A little later, the rise in threats and violent rhetoric aimed at Canadian politicians. We got access to federal intelligence documents. We'll tell you what they warn of. A pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Manitoba has been dismantled. Protesters left peacefully this morning, more than 2 months after setting up. The university says it provided a response to their list of demands, which included a boycott of Israeli institutions implicated in human rights violations. The university had threatened legal action if the encampment wasn't removed by 8 o'clock this morning. And an 8 a.m. deadline has come and gone at Vancouver Island University, and protesters there are staying put. A trespass notice is in effect, and the university is threatening legal action. Canada's premiers have as many differences as they have things in common, and they always have gripes with the federal government. So their annual meeting in Halifax this year is rife with battles over jurisdiction and funding. As Heidi Petracek reports, Indigenous and healthcare leaders are also hoping to be heard.
Our messages were heard.
Indigenous leaders came to Halifax in hopes for a relationship reset with the provinces and came out of a 2.5-hour meeting with some optimism.
It's time to get together and work on those things and respect the nature of self-determination for Inuit and also for Métis and First Nations in this country.
BC's leader David Eby acknowledged the premiers have work to do in recognizing Indigenous jurisdiction and decision-making powers.
Making sure that they're recognized as rights and title holders and for the service providers for the services they provide across Canada.
That even as the provinces bring up their own beefs with Ottawa over jurisdictional issues, writing in a letter sent to the Prime Minister in advance, we urge the federal government to refrain from unilateral actions in areas of provincial and territorial jurisdiction. Alberta's Danielle Smith pinpointing Ottawa's carbon reduction policies.
There is one minister in particular who continues to bring forward policies that are terrible for our province. I've called for him to be fired.
For others, the formula used by Ottawa to dole out equalization payments isn't working. On the East Coast, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador has already launched a court action challenging the constitutionality of the equalization program, a case Eby says he intends to support from the West Coast.
Well, I'll be advancing those conversations with Premier Fury here. I hope we can have an announcement before the end of COF about our plans on this because it is completely unacceptable.
One area the premiers say has been subject to Ottawa's unilateral actions is healthcare, and that's the focus Tuesday. A topic Canadians are deeply concerned about. A new Environics research poll finding 74% believe it's in crisis. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
4 people have been arrested on drug charges in Quebec after 62 kilograms of cocaine were found hidden in a grand piano. Search warrants on 3 locations also turned up $10,000 cash and several electronic devices. The 4 people face charges of suspected conspiracy to import and traffic cocaine. An investigation was launched after a tip from U.S. Homeland Security. On alert, coming up, we got access to government threat assessments, what they warn public officials in Canada are facing. After the assassination attempt against former U.S. President Donald Trump, Canada's Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc says he's been briefed by security intelligence officials here and says he's been assured they're exercising increased vigilance. At the same time, Global News has obtained threat assessments that reveal a torrent of online hate targeting our own politicians and public officials. Mackenzie Gray looks at the threat and how it's being managed.
Violence like this increasingly becoming the political norm in Canada. Former Cabinet Minister Marco Mendicino spat on outside his office.
We see a climate of cheering on or encouraging violence, and that has to be something that we all collectively say clearly that is not a functioning society.
Violence numerous government threat assessments obtained by Global News have warned about for years. The sustained high volume of violent anti-authority online rhetoric against public officials has fostered a culture in which individuals feel that they can threaten, incite, and celebrate political violence online without consequence, said several assessments from December 2022. A climate conservative Michelle Rempel-Garner has worried about for years.
I've actually had scenarios where charges have been laid and somebody has been released on bail immediately and then disappeared. And then these were death threats. So I have to walk around wondering where this person is.
Rempel has not publicly discussed any other details about the threats, but Liberal Pam Demoff has, sharing more than 24 messages laden with so much profanity and misogyny, we can't say them on the air.
We've seen in other countries where MPs have been physically attacked or killed, and it's certainly something that crosses your mind when there's so much anger out there.
That anger hasn't translated into charges against those who threatened him off.
Christia,
you doing in Alberta?
And Ottawa's former police chief, also a former Conservative senator, believes that intimidation often doesn't meet the criminal code threshold.
There is an expected level that you have to put up with before the Crown and maybe even the police would say, well, you know what, that's crossed the criminal threshold.
The threats and lack of action has led DeMoff to say she won't run in the next election, Donna. And her Liberal colleague, Justice Minister Arif Irani, says police already have the tools to handle the situation.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. The man who crashed his truck into the gates of Rideau Hall 4 years ago has been granted statutory release. A decision by the Parole Board of Canada obtained by Global News says Corey Huron was freed last week on multiple conditions, among them that he must seek psychological counseling as well as employment. Huron was arrested in 2020 when he rammed his truck through Rideau Hall's gates. According to court documents, he was outraged by the federal government's COVID-19 restrictions and its ban on assault-style firearms, and he was attempting to arrest the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who lives on the grounds of Rideau Hall. He had multiple firearms. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison on firearms and mischief charges and granted day parole more than a year before his release. World Cup warning ahead. Fears the U.S. and Canada won't be able to cope with passionate soccer fans. In Kenya, a suspected serial killer has been arrested after the discovery of several bodies at a quarry. And a warning, some of the details are disturbing. Police say the 33-year-old man confessed to killing 42 women over 2 years, including his wife. He was arrested days after the dismembered bodies of 9 women were found at an abandoned quarry. Police say they found several mobile phones, identity cards, and a machete at his home. In Somalia's capital, at least 9 people were killed, 20 others injured when a car bomb exploded outside a restaurant that was packed with soccer fans watching Sunday's Euro Cup final. The blast leveled the cafe and destroyed cars and nearby buildings. The al-Qaeda-linked Islamist group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility, saying it targeted an area close to the presidential palace where security and government workers meet at night. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico are preparing to host the World Cup in 2026. After the mayhem at Sunday's Copa America finals in Miami, Florida, there are some concerns North America may not be ready. Hundreds of people forced their way into the stadium, overpowering police and security. As Mike Armstrong explains, critics say that kind of chaos should serve as a warning.
The stadium administration says it had twice the number of staff working that it would normally have at a sold-out event.
What is going on here?
It was very clearly not enough.
People are getting into the Copa America through the ventilation system.
In a statement, the company says unruly fans without tickets tried to overpower security and police. It started in the afternoon and the chaos continued for hours. The start of the game had to be pushed back 4 times. Argentina's coach says before the game, players were watching videos of the chaos and had to take to the field worrying about family members in attendance. Now, there were 27 arrests. 2 men were charged with trespassing and battery on a law enforcement officer. There were also injuries. This 9-year-old boy had his arm broken, crushed by unruly fans.
There was like a stampede, and somebody hit my elbow, and now it's fractured.
Miami's mayor issued a statement saying she's outraged by what happened. Quote, "This situation should never have taken place and cannot happen again." Well, the U.S., Canada, and Mexico are set to co-host the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And there are questions as to whether North America is ready for soccer's supporter culture and the hooliganism that can come with it.
Soccer's worked really hard to try and stamp that out. There's a difference between being passionate and being anarchic. And I think that we saw the difference in the beginning last night.
Security will be a big issue for World Cup host cities. Toronto and Vancouver are reportedly already 2 and 3 times over budget. That may go even higher. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Next, Paris leans on its landmarks to host a more sustainable Olympic Games. Just 11 days until the Paris Olympics begin, and the Olympic torch is in town. A French BMX champion carried the flame in front of the Eiffel Tower today. The torch will make a final lap around France before the Games begin on July 26th. When the Olympics come to town, it can be great and it can be a nightmare. Building venues and housing athletes is a massive, hugely expensive task. Paris is trying to do things a bit differently, as Redmond Shannon reports.
From Montreal to Athens, Olympic Games can saddle cities with massive debts and herds of white elephants.
Cities and taxpayers were just had enough of this huge bill and poor legacy planning and less bid.
Olympic bids expert Rob Livingstone says after Athens, the International Olympic Committee began pushing for games with fewer new permanent venues. Tokyo built 8 among its 43 locations, and now Paris has just 2. The Aquatic Centre, which will be used by the community after the Games, and the Gymnastics Arena, already a new home for a pro basketball team. Other sports will be at existing venues like track and field at the 26-year-old Stade de France or tennis at the legendary Roland Garros. In addition, there will be bleachers. Lots of them.
We have installed more than 60,000 temporary seats in the city centre of Paris.
From beach volleyball under the Eiffel Tower to skateboarding at Place de la Concorde and fencing inside the Grand Palais. Paris is about to show off like only Paris can, with temporary venues dotted among its romantic landmarks. Not to mention open water swimming in the cleaned up River Seine, as now tested by the sports minister. In 4 years' time, Los Angeles aims to host with no new venues. Of course, that's all well and good in a megacity.
There are very few cities that have all that existing infrastructure to be able to host so many events that are part of the Olympic Games.
So the IOC says future games could take place across entire regions or even across borders. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Pyramid Lake in Jasper National Park, Alberta. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.